And now we turn to the festering feud on Capitol Hill over the massive budget cuts that will kick in automatically in just 2 weeks, unless some kind of deal can be reached. Right now, the chances of that look awfully slim. And with the crisis approaching, Congress is taking next week off. So where does that leave us? Well, let's ask Maggie Haberman, senior political reporter with Politico. It's great to have you with us, Maggie.
Thanks for having me.
This sounds a little bit like Groundhog Day.
Right.
What are the chances of a deal getting done?
They are slimmer than it was last time with the fiscal cliff deal, but you can never say never. We were talking about the fiscal cliff deal on this set right before there was one.
I remember.
There's not a lot of time, as you said. They are going on break, so it gives a week. What most people expect will happen is some form of the sequester will kick in on March 1st. It's about $85 billion in automatic cuts to specific departments. But when they deal with the continuing resolution, which is how you keep funding the government a couple of weeks later, they could potentially come in and kind of save it that way. I think that's the likeliest. Republicans right now have some pressure. They have crosswinds to not give in to this because the current mantra is cutting is good, so we should go along with this cutting. So the incentive is slim.
Right. Senate Democrats have put forward a proposal this week to stop the sequester. It cuts some spending, raises taxes on millionaires. Is this a viable plan?
Well, it's only a viable plan if it can actually get passed in the House. I think it is a starting point. Remember, we saw something similar with the fiscal cliff where you saw it begin in the Senate and deal its way down that way. We'll see. I don't think this is what it will end up looking like, but this could be, if there is a short-term deal, this could be the beginning of the makings of it.
The whole idea behind the sequester in the first place was forced action. Make the spending cuts so painful that Congress has to come along and do something.
Right. Right. So
if they don't,
right.
If they don't, as they didn't already, what does that say about Congress, and does this stuff even have teeth? I mean, are laws like this one even worth passing?
It's a really good question. The answer is sort of no, because it doesn't include wartime spending and it doesn't include entitlement cuts. So there's really no huge incentive to do this either way. It is worth noting everybody, including the president, agreed to this. It's not just Congress. But I do think you're right that Congress will end up getting the brunt of the blame. If nothing happens, it feeds into the notion that nothing gets done in Washington.
There is a strategy at work here that doesn't seem to be working, which is this constant sort of pushing things off, creating some kind of potential disaster to force something to happen. And we're in this cycle now where we just keep going here.
Yeah, so the president bemoans this, but also still calls for a short-term deal. This is sort of problematic. Yeah. However, without a deal, it obviously immediately threatens the sense of a recovery. The bigger question is what happens with markets. There's been a lot of scare talk about the cuts and what they will look like and how it will impact defense spending in particular. But realistically, we are talking about some stagger. The big question is how markets react and what kind of an impression this leaves in terms of the recovery, which is fragile.
And also how the consumer reacts. What position does it put the consumer in?
Consumers have been sort of skittish as it is, but I don't think this is going to help.
All right, Maggie Haberman, thanks as always.